You bring up a really good word when it comes to validation. And in modern society, we've been trained, and it's not just apparently hearing you say that from halfway across the globe and knowing that I relate to that so well sitting here in the US, it is amazing to me that regardless of where we are in the world, the same thing happens to us both. Right? The same thing is that we grow up in cultures where there's this inherent need. I would call it a need because some people do need it. And there's a need to be validated by some third party that is deemed to know better than us.
Welcome back to Relatable Wisdom, the podcast where everyday people share the quotes that change their perspective, helping you discover new wisdom for your own journey, one conversation at a time. Today's guest is Paul Flowers Jr., an entrepreneur and father from the Chicagoland area who spent his career building businesses while never losing sight of what matters most: faith, family, and lifting others up. He's the kind of person who leads with his heart and believes that resources means creating a legacy that goes far beyond the boardroom. So let's settle in and hear the words that have changed Paul through life's biggest moments. Tell us your name and what your favorite quote is.
My name is Paul Howard Flowers Jr., and you said my favorite, what was that?
Favorite quote.
My favorite quote? There's a few of them, but I'd be remiss if I didn't actually point to the one that's right above me here on the shelf. And that one is one from Gandhi. It says, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." That one for me has special meaning, so much so I even have a tattoo of it on my back. Be the change you wish to see in the world.
Change you wish to see in the world. How, if we had to trace your first encounter with this quote?
Oh man, at least 20 plus years ago, I remember being in college when I first got into personal development. And it was on that personal development journey. I was working with a company called Prepaid Legal. It's Legal Shield now. They really introduced me to reading for the sake of reading and developing myself, not just reading like to study something and pass a test and get a grade, but reading so that I can invest in myself and that I can pass whatever test that life ultimately threw at me. I'm so thankful for those mentors that came into my life. And it was through that journey. Again, I couldn't say exactly when along that journey, but I know it was pretty early on, as this particular tattoo I think I got in 2007, maybe. And I had started with Prepaid Legal, again, Legal Shield, back in 2005. So it was within my first couple of years of personal development that I'd come across this quote. And it hit me in so much that it says, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." Not talk about the change you wish to see in the world, not think about the change, not dream about the change, not wonder about the change. None of those other adjectives or verbs that can describe what somebody can do when it comes to actually creating change. It says, "Be the change."
Okay.
And that to me means you've got to embody that on a day-to-day basis. And honestly, that's what I've been striving to do ever since.
It's a good thing you talked about how other adjectives, other verbs, because that was like the next question I was about to like hit you with. And now I want us to really there are a couple of words that are really really important to the quote here is be, the word change. And before we even talk about change, I want us to look at what does it mean to be something. What does it mean? Like I want us to
Mm.
look at that. What does it mean to be something?
Man, so you asked the right question, either to the right guy or the wrong guy. I don't know because I've actually got a response for that one.
Okay.
So I think about the world of ontology, right, which is effectively the science of being. And that's more than just a theoretical practice. It's something that is lived and experienced. So if someone is to be happy, they don't just, again, think happy thoughts. They are whatever that definition of happiness is to them. So to a degree, it can be subjective based on a person's understanding of whatever the, I'll call it, topic is at the time. But being is an embodiment of, and you fill in the blank after that. So whatever it is that you're wanting to be, you are moving, thinking, doing. It's all of those things wrapped up in being. It's like there's a certain type of acting, method acting, where you step into character as this person, but not just when you're on camera. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that reminds me of stories where I think there was a story about Jim Carrey that was going for a particular role, and he
Okay.
was in that role 100% of the time, and someone addressed him as a fan coming up, "Hey Jim, I love your," and they were quickly cut off by one of his assistants. Whoa, 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 whoa. Don't call him Jim. He's not Jim, right? He's, and I forget again the particular role it was,
The
but
guy.
they mentioned that he's that person, right now. So when you say be, it truly is an embodiment from top to bottom, from inside to out, and that becomes essentially a staple of your identity, a very facet of your being.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good thing you mentioned the acting example, because now the question is, how do we, because if someone is acting is acting as a doctor in a movie, right? Are we going to say that that person is a doctor?
Mm. So many stories come up. I can think of a gentleman who I believe was one from the continent of Africa, that he basically studied law and without actually going through the formal school, represented several individuals and won every single one of his cases, including the case that was brought against him for falsifying his ability to act as a person of law. So that brings up a few things. One, do we always need and require the requirement? Do we need that requirement of formal education in order to be a thing? Now, I had a guest on whose daughter was going to school to be a doctor, and I would prefer that if someone's going to be operating on my body, I only get one. If someone's going to be operating on this body, that they at least go through a certain amount of schooling that
Yeah.
allows others to say, yes, this person is doing this in a way that is safe and effective, right? And that's really one of the only areas and instances that, well, I know I could probably think of some more: engineering, architecture. Like, I don't want somebody to act like an architect and act like an engineer and build a house for me, right? I have to sleep in this house. So, but again, that there's the thought of, like I said, that gentleman who practice law. It's words on paper that people ultimately agree to. Engineering, it's formulas and figures and calculations. Now, if you've mastered it without having gone through the traditional route, who's to say you're not? Right?
Okay.
Who's to say you're not? So it brings in some gray areas when it comes to the point of people actually essentially going through more practical education and life skill acting as a thing or doing a thing
Yeah.
than people that might have gone through 4 years of school and gotten a piece of paper to say they can do the thing,
Yeah.
right? So it draws in some potential gray areas, but I'll default to certain instances of things like, when you're operating on my body, I would like to know that you didn't just figure out that, hey, one day I just want to start cutting things open and seeing how they tick. I would like to have a little bit of certification behind it, but that again brings up just a really broad array of areas where sometimes you don't need the formal education to be a thing.
Okay. There's something I want to follow up with what you've said so far. Let's say someone was a doctor, right? They graduated from
Mhm.
the oh, they did really well. Like they were good students. They passed and they did everything they needed to do, and they got their certificate. Now, let's say in the event of something happened to the school and the record just got deleted. There was no way to trace the certificate, even their own certificate.
Mm,
Everything just stopped. So the person is actually a doctor. He has all the skills, but there is no way on earth you can actually prove or ascertain that he's actually a doctor, but he has the skills. Now, I want to tie it back to something I see really important in life is that, of course, professional courses like medicine and all that is very important that other person's consensus say that, oh, you are good at it. Very important. But in personal development and in other things, people want to start a business, start a podcast, people need permission from others because when you go through formal education, basically everything you're doing, you get permission from your teacher. They say, okay, they tell you to go to the next class, or they tell you do this,
yep.
they tell you to go to the next stage. Everybody is telling you what to do, and you trust them, you believe them. But now you're starting your business. You don't know, okay, should I put money on this thing, or should I do this? Should I like you don't know what to do, and so you're waiting. Someone should tell me what to do. You want to do something, but you're looking for external validation or permission to do the thing, and that's for me. in that context, it doesn't work for us.
You bring up a really good word when it comes to validation. And in modern society, we've been trained, and it's not just apparently hearing you say that from halfway across the globe and knowing that I relate to that so well sitting here in the US, it is amazing to me that regardless of where we are in the world, the same thing happens to us both. Right? The same thing is that we grow up in cultures where there's this inherent need. I would call it a need because some people do need it. And there's a need to be validated by some third party that is deemed to know better than us. And again, that brings up so many areas, right, that we can go with the conversation. And I don't know which one to travel down. I'll touch on a few things and then turn it back to you. When it comes to religion, we seem to need someone else to tell us about creation or God's word and how that's supposed to be. And we've seen how many ways that can be interpreted and how many ways that can turn people against each other for one reason or another. When it comes to education, we've seen how many times that in certain courses and classes that hell, the student might have more practical education or information about the particular topic than the teacher. And you say, well, how can that be? And the teacher has gone through and gotten their doctorate and their PhD, and now they're back teaching business. Well, all business schools don't require the instructors to have run a successful business in order to actually teach about business. And I find that to be amazing. It doesn't require the teacher to actually have mastered communication to actually come back and teach communication, right? Because when it comes to communication, there's so many ways to do it. Yet, having studied communication outside of the formal education sphere, I've seen that instructors that were teaching me communication only taught one way. So if they're used to teaching visually, but I'm an auditory learner, or they're used to teaching in an auditory method and I'm a kinesthetic learner, or they're missing a portion of what they can teach to, right? So when we talk about that validation piece, it's so interesting that that's how our world creates us to essentially seek validation, or you also said permission, right? Which was another good word, is that we're taught to essentially need permission to pass on into that next phase of that higher learning. Quite frankly, I think that we can change that narrative. And much of that will be started with conversations like the one we're having right now.
Yeah, yeah. I think being is it's of course permission and all that stuff. Those things have their own relevance. That's like a topic of another day. But being is what you are without. So like it's not something that you need a permission to be. Like I can wake someone in the middle of the night. You're still who you are. Like it's a being. It's a continuous something. It's an identity.
Right.
It's far more beyond okay what someone has conferred on someone like declarations can change over time overnight. Someone can say okay because of one thing you did you can no longer practice medicine, you're no longer a doctor, but I mean does that stop you from from being from having the skills and all that?
Right. Right. Yeah. And you had a good point. Like you said, if a doctor went and got their degree and then their school was essentially erased, right? That happens here all the time where schools lose accreditation and they can essentially disappear. The high school that my sister went to was a private Catholic high school, Seton Academy. And I believe they closed the doors of that particular high school, right? People that I've known have gone to schools and I've heard time and time again, well, that school has closed. But does that discredit the fact that they took the time to learn the information and practice it? I don't think so. But to your point of how can a person prove, especially in that instance of someone being a doctor, if they're actually a doctor, man, that's a tough one. Because in what situation would they need to actually verify it is the question that comes to mind. And then what I automatically jump to, like an emergency, I would hope that this person that has trained professionally as a doctor that is seeing something happen that they can step in and assist, I'd hope that they would essentially come in and assist. Now, that brings its own ball of wax with it, whether or not the Good Samaritan laws and all that, if the person's going to turn around and try to sue them, type of thing. But I would really hope that regardless of whether or not their credentials could be validated, that that person would act in good faith of what they know themselves to be. Now, we just hope that they're of sane mind, body, spirit as they practice this, because there are people that may not be, and this is May, right here in the States, the month of May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And that's a real concern that people have things going on mentally that have yet to be discovered or identified. And they can say that they're whatever they want to say, right? There's this whole freedom of speech thing. And I occasionally will find myself, going down the rabbit hole of YouTube and looking at court shows or something like that that'll pop up in my feed. I saw one where a guy was like, clearly was not a member of the CIA, but he pulls up some papers and like, well, I'm a member of the CIA. And I'm like, dude, if you were in the CIA, you probably wouldn't be on Judge Judy. Okay. So it's we have to be mindful of the mental state of anyone that says that they're a thing, which I guess to that point is where the validation comes up, because unfortunately everybody's not well, and with everybody not being well to a degree, it makes it hard to trust certain aspects of your life and giving them over to another person. So I'll pause there because I'll get off the soapbox and give it back to you, because there's just so many ways to go with this one.
Yeah, and I quickly, I just want to like was to round up on the B part, which is, sometimes we have to be intentional about what we want to be. You understand? Because I give an example. Being a professor of communication does not make you a good communicator, but your intention could be, I want to be a good communicator, but then you end up teaching communication and stuff like that, which you could. It doesn't mean that you can't be a professor and still be a good communicator. They can both be true. Being a professor of communication, knowing all the textbooks about communication, doing research on communication and all the things about communication does not make you a good communicator. And so sometimes you have to say, what do I want to be? Do I want to teach communication? Do I want to do research experiments on communication? Or do I want to be a good communicator and able to chat and have a conversation with someone and get my message across easily?
Now, in that instance, for that professor, I'll say for that person, because that would essentially be anyone, we have a couple ways to look at it. You've got your theoretical, and then you've got your practical. So you've got those that, in theory, may, again, learn about a thing. So we'll just take communication, for example. You may read the books, study, again, be validated by your peers to say that you know enough about communication in a theoretical sense in order to turn around and then teach theory. But do you practice it? Do you practice it? Right. So then flip to the practical side. Now, take the professor piece out of it. How about just a person who goes and works on their speaking, right? Every single week. How about a person who goes and works on their listening? Because we think about communication as only what we put out as opposed to what we use to take things in. Our listening is a huge part of communication. How do you listen? Right?
Yeah.
How do you listen? I share with my son some affirmations that he, for the last 9+ years has been speaking. He's 12, right? So we started this when he was about 3 years old. But I asked him, I say, well, Mason, what are the 3 important things? And he says, reading, writing, speaking,
Yeah.
right? And then I say, well, give me 3 more. He says, learning, growing, thinking, right? So reading, writing, speaking, and I'll start with those. As portion of communication, it takes putting things in order to get things out, right? Think about how we learn from becoming a human in this society, in any society. We're born essentially a blank slate, and then people begin to put things into us. Now, at a point, we have to take control of our own minds so that we're not just waiting, right? Some along the lines of validation. We're not just waiting for someone to give us the information. We go out and actively seek it, right? So with reading, we can take thousands of years of people's experience, right? Hundreds, tens, decades, thousands, right? Basically, of all these other people's experiences and input it or download it, if you will, into our minds in just a matter of minutes for some short reads, hours for some others. But typically, for most books, within a couple of days, a week, if you just, spend a little bit less time on each day reading it, but within a good week, you can read a good book, which says that if you read it with the intention of really comprehending it and not just like speeding through it, that you can put a good amount of information in. Right? So that's the reading part, the writing. Well, you can communicate some of the thoughts that you've now read to other people. And it takes for you to write things out at times, to even take good notes to put them into you. So writing has its ability, its form, or its place in the communication sphere for us to put a message out there. And then, of course, there's speaking, which some people just talk, other people speak. So when you go and actually practice how to speak, and along with the others, you practice how to write clear and cohesive messages, practice how to read to actually comprehend. And again, I'm going to put with that listening, you learn how to listen from that other person's perspective, right? To really truly grasp what it is that they're communicating to you. That person that does those things might not have a degree,
Yeah.
right? They might not have gone to the fancy school. They might not have gotten in all this debt. They might not have gone through and gotten validated by their peers as a communications expert. Yet they can run circles around the PhD communications professor at the best school, the Ivy League school that you can think of. So again, to your point of earlier, do we really need the education piece? In some instances, it's viable. But do we need to actually do something in order to be? I think that's where it really, that really the focus should really be, is what are you doing in order to be the thing? You know, what have you done, and what are you doing? Because for any profession, anything that you want to do in life, there ideally will be some things that you've already accomplished, right? Some type of marker that you can say, hey, I've completed X, Y, and Z step. And if you are being that, then there's always going to be something that you're working on right now. If I say I'm a great communicator, I'm reading a book right now. I've got the book, my current reads, two of them actually. One is The Richest Man in Babylon here on my desk. And then the other, because I'm working on a book, is Publish, Promote, Profit. And again, both of these are the current reads. So I can't say that I'm a great communicator and I'm an soon to be published author and all that and not be doing anything about it. Be is an act. Be is an action. And that action is something that is like pressing play on a video. It's moving. It's not just on pause and still.
It's what for me is very grieving my heart right now is the fact that we're just about starting this episode, and this I know that this is the kind of topic that the conversation could go for an hour, but
Oh man, yeah.
unfortunately it's about 30 minutes that is booked, and my biggest fear right now is that I want us to round up the episode such that the next guest that's going to come on doesn't get to join us on this meet.
Gotcha. Absolutely. Absolutely. So
Okay.
with that, yeah, let me know how you'd like to land the plane, man. We can bring it on in.
Okay. So what I want us to do is well, right now it's 4:35 for me, so we have about 5 minutes, right? I want us to look at what change actually means, right? You know, we've talked about the identity part being something, right? What does it mean? Because we
Mhm.
want to be the change, right? Some people they want to help the sick people. Some people they want to do so many things that they want to do. They want to make more money. So how do we be the change? What does change mean? Because for me, I feel like there's something called pseudo change. It's false change. It looks like change, feels like change, appears like change, but it's not change. Okay, so what exactly
Well, I'll put this one as succinctly as possible. If you want to change something, I'll start off with a mantra that I've been using for some years now. Don't complain about things that you aren't willing to change. And in order to then change a thing, first off, you need a vision for how it's going to look once the change has occurred. And once you have that vision of how it's going to look, then quite frankly, it needs to become your mission. So this is your purpose now. This is what you are living for. If you want to be the change, you are living to do this very thing day in and day out. So at that point, we've got a vision. We know how it can look once it comes from point A to now point B. Now it's a part of us, right? It's our mission. It's the thing we wake up and dream and eat and sleep about that we want to do on a regular basis, more so than really anything else. Now we have to act. We have to act. And we don't have time to go down the entire, again, rabbit hole, I'll say, of what it means to plan this and, excuse me, create the community around it, create the awareness, began to enroll others in that vision, start to delegate and have others to take on that mission as a part of their mission as well, right? There's a lot of steps in order to bring this into fruition. But the main points are we have to have a vision of what it will look like. It has to become our mission first and our purpose in life. And we have to have some sort of action plan behind it. So vision, mission and purpose, and an action plan. I would say those would be the three elements of change.
Okay. Mission, vision, and then an action plan. And yeah, for me personally, one of the things I've seen is that in every field we try to do things on. There are things that help to do the main thing, right? But they're not the main thing per se. I'll give an example. You said you're writing your book, right? Reading
Correct.
and reading other people's book to get a perspective on some of the things and stuff like that is very important. It helps to do the main thing. But what's the main thing? The main thing is what? Writing the book. Now you could love books, you could do a lot of research, you could watch a lot of video, you could take courses and do all that. But if you don't write a book, it's you know it's not
Pointless.
it's nothing.
Yeah.
So a lot of person they get so much stuck in all these sweet other aspects of the thing that they don't get to do the main thing itself. And in this case, it's book. It could be starting a business. They take courses on starting a business. They watch a lot of videos on starting a business. They read all the business books, but they don't start a business. They don't actually
Right.
start selling stuff, making currency flow. None of those stuff, and they don't get to really make the change because they don't get to do the main thing.
Well, I'll just again touch on it briefly and say that, excuse me, uh, you have to have an inspired reason why. And I say an inspired reason why because there are some whys that can come from outside. Like you want to start a business so that you can pay your bills, right? And you can live in a house, right? That's outside stuff. An inspired reason why is something that drives you from the inside. I want to feel the joy and happiness of waking up every day and my children being able to wake up with whatever it is that they want to do, anything that they think of, and then we go and do it. That's the inspired reason why. My wife says, "Oh, I think it'd be really nice to show the children the Great Pyramids." And we wake up and say, "That sounds like a good idea. Get on the computer and book that. Let's go there in 3 weeks." Right. So we start the business for those inspired reasons of ultimately what I think it may boil down to, not just for myself, but for a lot of people, is freedom. And again, that's a topic that we can touch on for a great length. So without going too deep into it, an inspired reason why, a lot of it boiling down to the freedom to do, be, and choose our lives.
Yeah, I'd love to like. It's so easy chatting with you, and I feel we've known we're just catching up, and the conversation is just flowing well. And so I'll reach out
Absolutely.
immediately after this call. Now, I'll reach out to you via the name of the podcast is called My Podcast Story. So when you get a message from me, you should just know that it's me, so that would really I know talk about the podcasting, the business, and how everything is connecting, how the vision, why you're doing it, and all that. And so this is me just pitching myself out there and telling because I love to continue this chat. 30 minutes is not going to. No, no, no. There's so many things we have
Yeah.
to talk about. We need to talk for another one. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Thank you so much for this episode. Thank you so much for making it easy for me to have this conversation. I mean, it takes two to tango.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
where can listeners learn more about you and check out what you're doing?
All of my social media is under my full name. So my name is Paul Howard Flowers Jr. And in order to not type out everything, you just search at Paul H. Flowers Jr. That's PaulHFlowers Jr. So if you go on YouTube, I'm at Paul H. Flowers Jr. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, it's all Paul H. Flowers Jr. My website is www.paul.health, and you can have all the links are going to be there for again LinkedIn, YouTube, all of my everything. Everything is there. So you want to learn about me, go to www.paul.health or just pop in at Paul H. Flowers Jr. in your Google browser, and I should come right up.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paul, for coming on the podcast. Uh,
You're
message you. I'll stop. Thanks for listening to Relatable Wisdom. If you found something meaningful in this episode, make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. If you'd like to support the show, you can do that by buying me a coffee. The link is in the show notes. Every little bit keeps the conversations going. I'm your host, Wisdom Okonkwo, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep growing.